deployment, just like every other radio frequency that's around right now. So it's just going to be added to the mix. So this is going to be a nice lead off to get us to our next question. So if we run into a customer that is fearful of 5G and maybe doesn't want us to be, doing this type of thing in their home, how do we go about maybe talking about this with them? Tom?
Sure, another good question. So what I would say is, if you think about the number of antennas that are currently used in a typical phone, I think there's up to 12 antennas, because you're connecting to the GPS signal, you're connecting to Wi-Fi, you're connecting to cellular signals. The difference with 5G is that you have greater bandwidth, but again, the cost for radiation or the potential for radiation is really, really minimal. If anything, when you have a weak cell signal inside of a building or inside of a home, your phone is actually struggling to try to connect to that cell tower, to try to connect to that signal. So there's potentially more output or more signal output from a situation like that compared with a situation where you have 5G streaming back and forth. So there really is no issue here or no cause for concern.
Joe, any thoughts on how you got any tricks? The way we use
and you hold it to your head. And you hold it to your head. He's exactly right. You hold that to your head. We'll get to deployment here shortly, but in deployment, we'll talk about how things are put out. And we know that damaging wireless or frequencies typically are with those that are high powered. Some of the ones the government uses in warfare that are actual frequencies used to make enemy soldiers feel sick. When you talk about a deployment that has to be one at every square mile, the reason why is the power output to actually move that is not the same. So it is less than what is already out there and what, like Tom said, you hold up to your head.
All right. I think one of the best rebuttals that you can do for a nervous customer is the sunshine thing and the way it burns your skin. There's also frequencies, those are higher frequencies. And if you feel sensation of your skin burning, it's probably doing something. And if you don't, it's not. So I think that's a great way to dispel this. So let's go into the service itself. As we're all living and working from home, download speeds were important, but now upload speeds are equally important. So is 5G going to provide symmetrical service so you get the same download as you get the same upload? Tom?
Well, there's the big opportunity, because what's nice about 5G or the potential for 5G is that there'll be low latency or little or no latency. And one of the reasons for that is because there's a technology called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. So these antennas will actually have a number of different transmissions that will allow for very good connectivity, even with one bar. And that's the key advantage to 5G. 5G truly is the game changer.
Joe?
Well, on what Tom just said, in our industry, we're starting to get used to, MIMO and a bunch of other technologies that allow multiple input, multiple output. We're familiar with this already. When you translate that into providing service for IoT or for home networks or for business work for home, that latency thing is key, especially when we in our industry know that, your only good luck of getting asynchronous is with a very high-class business connection or with fiber. You really can't get that right now with broadband, DSL, satellite, or any of the other things that we're deploying to get these things in houses right now. So you take it to a whole nother level with cutting the cord, no more wire to the house, and the ability to almost live off the grid while on the grid. So those technology advances are going to be huge for us in the way that we transmit and receive data, whether it be school, work, or entertainment.
Yeah, if I could just add one more thing to that, I think what's nice about 5G is that we're actually transitioning from analog to digital again. I mean, 4G was really the game changer, and it sort of whet our appetite in terms of being able to view video on our telephones. And if you think about it, more people now are doing more computing on their phones than their actual computer. 5G is just going to revolutionize that, because again, you're going to have higher bandwidth. There's going to be no latency. You'll be able to stream. You'll be able to connect to billions of devices through Internet of Things. It just offers so much more in the way of computing power and potential for basically revolutionizing a lot of industry, a lot of phone devices, and so forth.
All right. So what does a physical infrastructure look like? And I'm not talking about inside the home yet, but what are we going to see as 5G gets deployed? Tom?
Sure. So in the cities, what you're going to see, and you're already seeing them, is you're going to see a network of small antennas They're going to be mounted on poles, on light poles, on sides of buildings, on rooftops of buildings. And in fact, if you go to New York and you just look up in the sky, you'll see multiple arrays of antennas. So you're going to see that first in the urban centers. And then remotely, or I should say in the remote areas, you'll see towers, the traditional towers, but again, you'll also see cells in communities. But this infrastructure is being built out now, and that's what's going to take place between now and the next 5 years. But in terms of the infrastructure, yes, you're going to see a number of antennas in cities first, and that'll actually kind of fuel the movement for smart city activity, because you'll have that connectivity at that point.
Okay, Joe, any comment on that?
He pretty much nailed it. I mean, there's not a lot to add to it other than, we'll be seeing more antennas. I know that they're going to be a little more discreet and prettier than what we've seen in the past. But the deployment is the thing I'm waiting on. It's like, please deploy it already, because we want this.
Yeah, and I've heard there's lots of arguments on the deployment side because of real estate battles. They have to come to agreements to leasing poles. That's my pole. You can't put that cell there because you're going to have to pay me a fee. So I think that's probably our largest barrier to deployment is just all the negotiations that need to be met so that people can actually put these things out. So we talked a little bit about the outside, and I didn't want to spend a lot on the 5G technology itself, but we do have to now start to move inside. So 5G is a very small signal. Smaller signals have issues going through surfaces. So will we have transmitters located within the residence on the property, or boosters, or whatever you'd like to call it? And I'm going to throw that one to Joe first.
So, we've already started to see a trend within the 4G space. And this has to do with, the local ISPs. If you get fiber from, it doesn't matter if it's CenturyLink or Verizon or whoever, okay, great. You have gig, you have really good upload. But when you're still dealing with broadband, which typically in a residence maxes out somewhere between 250 and 500 meg, but a lot of residents can still only get 100. 4G modems have actually become a thing because they could support 150 meg. So that's kind of a big thing just in the 4G space. Now you bring that to 5G. Do I believe that, access points, repeaters, a lot of that will be in the home? Of course I do. But when we talk about our industry where there's a typical LAN, an actual internal network, I see an external antenna on a house with a modem, very similar to what we do right now with broadband. And then that is connected to our typical home network and build accordingly. I just hope that they get away from the charging by usage instead of by speed, which we're used to with all our ISPs. But I do believe that transition will happen. And once it's available, happen fast. One of the big reasons is when power goes down in your house right now, Walt, you using broadband or fiber, guess what? You also lose your internet. But if you have your whole system, your network on a battery backup, and that 5G modem on a battery backup, guess what? Your neighborhood's dark, but you're not. So those are those kind of things that we're already looking at the architecture. We're already starting to deploy now based on 4G. When 5G hits, I think it's going to massively change our business on the installation side, because now we're going to be also able to be faux ISPs to actually be able to deploy the modem and take a 5G SIM card, and now we become that go-around. So the monetary value for our industry is huge inside the home.
I know you have a few things to say on this.
No, I would agree. There's definitely going to be a fixed wireless access point on the home, and that brings that connects obviously to the macro network and brings the signal into the house. But I think what's interesting about this is that you'll probably see an array of antennas in a neighborhood. And again, 5G allows that connectivity for that entire neighborhood to optimize signal or to basically gather data. And there's going to be some technology innovations that we can't even comprehend at this point. But I really do like that connectivity feature of the wireless access point for neighborhoods.
All right. So Joe, you hit on something that I think is really important in a lot of our minds. So if 5G is so fast and you have IPv6 and devices can communicate to one another wirelessly, how's that going? You kind of touched on it as far as the traditional network with firewalls and routers and switches. How are we going to maintain control of our inside systems? How are we going to wire them up? And what are your thoughts on what an integrator's day-to-day job is then going to change to once 5G is fully out there?
I don't think it's all the way going to change, but it's going to be impacted in a way that we've already been impacted, and we're not really attributing it to the way 5G is going to work. So right now we know, in our space in smart home, luxury, mid-size homes, we're doing, Control Fork Restaurant Savant control systems, which typically talk and communicate on the LAN. However, you have consumer devices that are highly popular that are integrated with a Control Fork Savant or Crestron or Elan, or the list goes on. And those devices are like Ring, Nest thermostats, Ecobee thermostats, Rachio irrigation controllers. All of these things currently today do not talk on the LAN anyways. They go out to the cloud-based service over at Rachio or Nest, and then the integration with the control system is from cloud to LAN. It already goes off and come back. With IPv6, we're going to deal with the same thing, just in a much larger spread, but also with faster return times. Because we're used to, in our world, when you hit from a home automation systems remote temperature down, we're used to the fact that that has to go out to the cloud and then return from the cloud to the device. We're used to that kind of latency, that delay already. So when that rolls out, we're going to be dealing with the same thing. It's just going to be faster and more reliable. We will still have to deal with changes in Nest Cloud like we do today, or Ecobee's cloud service. That's not going to change. That's on the manufacturer side. But what it's going to give us the ability to do is create a much more stable, faster, and efficient process between these devices that already talk to the cloud. So for those who are in fear of, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my devices on the LAN, you lost that years ago. We're already dealing with that. Now we're just going to get a more stable platform to perform on. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. The firewall thing is also a thing that we shouldn't have to have a lot of questions about, because like I said, those devices are already communicating with the cloud, not on the LAN. So those firewalls are, over at Amazon and over at Google and over at all of those. We know they've had data breach problems. We can't fix that now, so we shouldn't expect to be able to fix that in the future. Locking down our firewall locally with mobile devices that are the consumers or their personal computer, office space, workspace, education space, that's still our job and won't change. So it shouldn't be a shocker or a big change to any of us, because little do we know, we kind of already operate that way. So there's a little benefit to the integrator. We're already used to this transition. It's just a different, faster, and more efficient way to do it.
Tom, you want to chime in on that?
Sure, Joe, you really hit the nail on the head, because I think what the other thing we have to realize too is that a lot of these devices are actually going to be processing technology or computer power at the device. And that's one of the advantages of 5G platform, is that it just creates that low latency. So there's processing power, at the edge as well as in the cloud. And that's a key benefit to the end user, right? Because again, they're getting their information immediately. And that's a key benefit for the consumer.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, not only is that processing happening in the edge or in the cloud, but it's happening on the device. Now, imagine if I could take all those rudimentary devices like irrigation controllers, HVAC, lighting control, all of that, push it through IPv6. Do you realize how much local LAN bandwidth and speed I am going to free up for my computer to talk to a printer, my computer to send something to another computer, and my kid to be able to do education in Zoom? And I'm going to free up so much local speed for my control system and for everything else. It's going to be a massive improvement right away. And that's kind of the big thing I'm looking for, is there's still ways for integrators to monetize this, obviously, but it's going to take some of the headaches away that we've had in the past with your typical cloud over standard IP. That is going to be a big thing for us. All integrators need to learn early how to monetize this and how to own that portion of the network.
And I think there's probably also an opportunity for integrators to monitor all of this offline or remotely, correct? So
absolutely.
I was just going to ask you guys that. Are there going to be new aggregation services and or new monitoring services to aggregate all these disparate things then?
Well, I'll tell you right now that some of the remote managing software that is already out right now is catered to be able to do that in the future. You've got Oversee from Snap and also Backpack, and you've got a couple of others that actually are monitoring every device that connects or talks on the network. And that's even a Nest thermostat will show up because it's got an IP address. So you'll still be able to do that. And I'm willing to bet all the guys who are in that space are already working on that, and it'll be ready by the time it deploys. Because believe me, they see the writing on the wall just like we do.
Yes, and Tom, I have a question for you regarding the kind of the tech side. So given this, and you're painting a glorious picture here, Joe, about the way you think the 5G is going to be superior, and we all want to jump to it like yesterday. Tom, do you think, and Joe, you chime in on this too, do you think that manufacturers are going to lean more towards 5G radio chips in their products and not Wi-Fi or something else?
That's a good
also
question.
Includes Zigbee and Z-Wave, I guess.
That's a really good question. Obviously, in the handset, it's going to incorporate both, because there is going to be a need to connect it to Wi-Fi solutions, right? Especially if you're using your device in multiple locations, which is what we do now. So I don't think that's going to change. But as I said, I think what's going to happen is that the benefit of 5G is going to be really apparent. Again, there's no latency. The fact that you can connect to billions of devices, I think that's really what's going to be a benefit to the users.
Joe, any comment on that?
Manufacturers in our space, I see a couple, maybe. One of the reasons why I think not is conversations with network manufacturers in our space, because I've asked about SIM card routers that you could do right now. Netgear has one. They're not in our space though. They're not a Lux or a Package or whatever. And the conversation has always been, well, we find more dependability over a wire. Which is fine and dandy. That is a space our industry I don't think is comfortable yet. I mean, we never saw them adopt, low power Bluetooth within their light switches. We saw a couple of consumer do that. We've never seen that happen in our space because there's the dependability and the security and the questions that they don't have answers to yet that end up in lawsuits. There's your answer. So they don't know what they don't know. And if it looks litigious, we'll stick with our wire and we'll stick with our Wi-Fi and we'll stick with our Zigbee and Z-Wave. Right.
So we're going to be moving into a massive hybrid situation, which has a question for me. How's the account management side going to work? In other words, right now you get a cellular account for your phone, and that's for your phone. So if I have all these devices that speak 5G, are you going to have a singular account and then you can just add these devices onto your account, or how's all that going to work?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Let's think about that, because obviously you're getting your signal now from your wireless service provider, right? Whether it's Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile, what have you. So I would suspect, obviously for your phone, you're getting 5G service, or you're getting service from your wireless service provider. The devices, that's a good question. Do you pay as you go? Are there going to be micropayments? I think that's a good question to find out, or to basically learn about what the financial models are. That is a very good question, Joe and Walt.
Yeah, Joe, please chime in on that, because I think this is one of the things that we're going to be talking about more as this comes to fruition.
And this is the one thing of all of it that actually scares me a little bit, because we know that cellular space does not play like ISP space. ISP traditionally bills on speed, whereas wireless technology bills on usage. Right, so you're with wireless even today, like I was saying with 4G, guaranteed 150 down. However, you have a 30 meg cap, and then $10 for every 5 over you go. Average home use in the United States, this is not luxury, this is average. Average home use is around 350 gig. Holy moly, that is a huge number. Now, if they're getting you by 30 gig is what they'll give you from wireless technology right now on 4G. You get 30 gig, and then there's an overage fee of $10 for every 5 additional gig. When our average home use is 350 gig per home, sure, you're guaranteed 150 meg speed, but usage is where wireless gets you. where our traditional ISPs just say, we're going to give you 100 or 200 meg, and for $100 a month, you can just go willy-nilly and do 1 million gig. We don't care. That is going to be the key. Will the wireless companies like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever, whatever springs up new, and partnerships with Dish, will they figure out that billing cycle to where the expectancy and the experience matches what consumers are used to as far as billing and payment systems? That is the red line that nobody has addressed, nobody has talked about, and we've got customers on 4G modems that are like, man, it's so great that, we're out in the middle of nowhere and the only other option is satellite internet. But my God, after 30 gig, I'm getting billed to death.
Yeah, well, my usage last month was 2.1 terabytes at a family of 5, which is absolutely insane. Now, my provider is not charging overage fees, by the way, and that was even before this pandemic happened. And I do believe that this pandemic will probably have benefited us because networks did not crash. Everyone all of a sudden started working from all over the place, still consuming data, but consuming them from nodes that they might normally not be consuming them from. So I'm very hopeful that the whole data cap thing might be a thing of the past because there's a new norm now. Anybody have? So Joe, you got your fingers crossed. Tom, have you taken a look into that at all as far
Well, that's a good question. I'll just cite from my own experience because I was having internet issues last week. And I had our cable provider come out here and he said, yeah, we had to add a node because we're at 90% capacity right now. And with everybody with kids being back in school, bandwidth demand is really high. So yes, I mean, that's a big issue in the industry, right?
And on that note, I'll add something to that. So, I kind of talked about hybrid solution, but I really do think in the future for those areas that do have, gigabit fiber, I do not see them changing to 5G as a primary. But however, I do see them doing kind of like was already alluded to, doing a hybrid situation with maybe a 5G access point to connect those IPv6 devices, or doing redundant failovers with 5G and a separate 5G modem, so that if their landline, their ISP fiber line does fail, power goes out, the router fails over into a 5G internet environment for permanent connectivity, so that if the cell guys still go along with the usage charges, I'm only paying $15, $20, $30 a month for the ability to have always on connectivity, still take advantage of the speeds of my fiber and my local area network. But if power goes down or services go down, I have a redundant backup, a failover on a secondary WAN that I'm always connected. That's another thing I'm looking forward to.
Tom?
Well, I think and even today, I guess the example you could use is that, for example, when my internet goes down, I switch over to a hotspot and use my 4G network. And then I pay the price, afterwards. But so yes, that is an issue.
So what are we missing here? What haven't we talked about? And for an integrator, how should they be starting to digest this and get prepared for this? And I'm going to throw it to you first, Joe, because you are an integrator, and you're starting to dabble in it too, at least just on the modem side. But I mean,
we're all old enough, at least on this call, that we remember cell service, pre-CDMA. We remember the origins of this. And as these things advanced, probably around, LTE, 3G, we started using remote apps for the control systems. So they were able to remotely control their homes. And we were able to let them see remote views of local land video cameras for surveillance and security cameras. This is just another transition in that. Every time there's been a change in either cell technology or ISP technology, when fiber rolled out the first time in Kansas City, we got a big red flag of, oh my gosh, we can do so much more. This is just an evolution of what we already know. But at least this time, we know, and it's kind of factual, that we are years down the road for real deployment. This time, we get to plan. We get to develop a business plan on how we are going to stay effectual, be able to deploy, and actually be able to service things within this space. Because most of the tech literature is already out there. You know, we know the way it's going to look. We know the way the rollout is pretty much going to work. We know there's a timeline. And now it's time to start developing business plans around that for us to be able to support our clients, support the technology, and then all the things we know is going to come with that. Talk about 3 years down the road, we know 8K is probably going to be a thing in a lot of homes within 3 to 5 years, right around the same time as 5G. Well, guess what? 5G is going to support streaming in 8K. So there's certain business things that we need to start looking at now, because it's not like gig, it's not like 4G. This time we actually have time to plan and prepare, and it not just drop in our laps.
Yeah, Tom?
I'd like to just add to that, because Joe brings up a good point. We're going to have a plethora of products that we can't even imagine that are going to be integrated into the home, as part of the smart home device. But one of the things that I see now when I'm traveling on the road is I'll see a van that says, smart home integrator. And I think that's really key, because, technology does scare a lot of consumers, right? I mean, they you hear this often. I don't know anything about technology, but I need things to work, right? And I just think that just opens up a wealth of opportunities for integrators to basically connect these devices in the home and support them and maintain them and upgrade them when necessary.
So thank you very much for that softball, Tom, because that's exactly where I was going to go to last. One of the things that we talk about a lot at CEDIA is the issue with the paradox of choice. People have too many decisions on what they should be using and what's available. This is just going to add to the confusion. So as far as going back to Joe and the business plan side of things and getting ready, being a technical liaison or a concierge service is exactly what you're going to end up probably being, and helping customers mitigate the landscape for all this stuff. It's just going to get even more confusing. So it's best you start spending some time figuring this out. How are you going to adapt your business to be able, so when the customers come and throw you these questions about, hey, there's this 5G thing, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, you have the answer and you can provide them the services. So are there any last comments?
Joe,
Joe?
I want to make a comment on your statement, because this goes a long time back for me.
Oh, this is a good comment or bad comment?
This is a great comment, because when 5G rolls out, it's going to bring back something I used a long, long time ago. Wireless devices in the home. I typically say it's always better, especially with TVs and certain things. Hardwire is the best way to go with technology today. But, when you talk about 5G, I always used to say, you know why wireless is better? A squirrel can't chew through your wireless. So you start talking about ISP. Now, hold on. You talk about ISP, irrigation companies, power companies, companies that rip up and replace sidewalks and driveways, and landscapers, and the guys who put the stone around your gardens. Guess what? They're not going to be able to cut through your ISP line if you're using 5G. And that rolls right into the conversation you just mentioned we're going to have about services and IPv6 and all these other things that we got to tie in that are going to be primarily wireless. That's that answer. This is not going to happen with a shovel or a backhoe or a ditch witch or a squirrel.
All right. Well, this has been a great discussion. I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time to be on this, and we'd like to move this now to the Q&A portion of the session. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Two things. Sorry about the audio starting a little late in the beginning, and sorry about the audio distortion. No, we didn't run it through a doubler or an Eventide audio processor. And Joe, you probably would know what that is because you're a guitar player. So that was just a weird thing with our pre-recording. So we do have a whole bunch of questions. You know what? They're all over the place. So I'm just going to start spouting them off. And I might direct some of them to one or both of you. So I'm going to start out with Tom. And we kind of did, I think, cover this a little bit, but I just want to make sure it's clear on the table. Joe, you answer this too. Will 5G kill Wi-Fi? Who wants to go first?
Well, will 5G kill Wi-Fi? It potentially could. I mean, realistically, it potentially could. Make no mistake about it. It's not going to happen immediately, but I think I think within 5 years, that'll be the real turning point for 5G as a service. It'll be more pronounced at that time. But potentially it could change home use for wireless and or for Wi-Fi, and potentially in business as well.
Joe, love your thoughts on that.
I possibly, and the only reason I say possibly is, once it rolls out and there's kind of like a footprint and some proof that it can be as secure as a nice, tight, lockdown local area network, then maybe that's a valid conversation. But it's going to be the same fear of, loss of data or loss of privacy or loss of all these things where it's no longer, controllable within my four walls. So that will be only time will tell. Will the public and especially, corporations be comfortable enough with this technology to know that all their information is secure?
All right, good enough. Tom, what type of cable would you recommend for the 5G antenna that you were discussing previously?
Well, right now we would use coaxial cable. I mean, in our world, we use primarily 400 grade 4X coax. You probably, again, depending on how strong the signal is outdoors, you could get away with RG6, but it really is a function of the signal conditions outside the building space where you're trying to bring signal in determines what type of cable you should use inside for your application.
Okay. Next question, Joe. Is it possible that 5G will be the end of the LAN? So we already talked about the Wi-Fi, and I think we have the same opinion on this, but I'm going to let you go ahead.
I'm going to say within our space, within the CEDIA space, I will say absolutely not. And here is why. It's a very obvious answer. I can almost promise you, I can't guarantee, but I can promise you, Control 4, Crestron, Savant, Align, the list goes on and on. They will never adopt 5G chips inside their products. Why? Because that's a source of the unknown, and that's a space they don't play in. And if they ever do, it would amaze me. I think because of the backbones of our current structures, it's not going to happen.
That's a super bold statement there, Tom.
I have to apologize. I have noise going out my side of my house here. Somebody's cutting the grass, it sounds like. So I missed the question. So if you could repeat that, please.
Yeah. Do you, let me get back up to it here. Is it possible that 5G will be the end of the LAN?
I'm not sure, candidly. Local area network. As I said, I think the real determining factor will be how easily this rollout is. And I think we made a point earlier. If there's any security breaches for 5G that are major, that happens across any sort of major brand, then certainly that could inhibit the development of 5G or the use of 5G. But I still think it's just too hard to predict that the LAN will go away.
Yeah, for me, I think, one of our mantras now is if it's stationary, wire it. I mean, why not? And if it's data intensive, wire it. And, it is 5G with all its promise, it's still wireless. And so I think if that happens, it's going to be a long time away. So, Joe, let's throw you the next one. Getting 5G inside a building won't happen. A clean connection between a home side antenna and a wired network / Wi-Fi 6 inside will be the future inside. So basically the question is, or the statement is, there won't be 5G in the home. Do we think, and this is to you too, Tom, do we think it's only going to be curbside and that it's going to, come to your house and then from there, it would be a traditional network and it would be Wi-Fi? Or will we have Wi-Fi, 5G transmitters built into our access points or anything else?
Okay, so the last part is kind of where I think it will get intriguing. But don't think for 1 second that companies like Wilson and SureCall and all of those guys already have technology to put an antenna outside your house with a repeater on the inside of your house. It's already happening. Just forget it. So you don't have to worry about that. Yes, there will be 5G broadcast inside your house. And, when you talk about access points and stuff like that, I do believe some of the big companies may jump on first. Ruckus, Cisco, Aruba, those mass market corporate companies, because of course we know they're already doing, 4G repeating with inside buildings. But if 5G is even close to what has been promised, your quality, your lack of latency, all of those things will be better than what you're currently used to with Wi-Fi calling, or using your cell devices on a Wi-Fi network internal. So to answer both of those, I absolutely do believe 5G will be inside corporate buildings and inside residences, and there's probably a plethora of companies that are already starting to build the devices that we are going to deploy to do this.
Let me just say that, well, first of all, Nextivity, SureCall, and Wilson actually have 5G boosters, but again, they're boosting the low band, and for a mid band, you need to have a retransmission agreement. But RSRF primarily serves enterprise clients, buildings that are basically 50,000 over 500,000 square feet. And every conversation that we have with a client today really revolves around the migration or the upgrade to 5G service. So the systems that we're installing today, the infrastructure can accommodate 5G. The only wild card in all this is how to handle millimeter wave transmission. But as I said earlier, the real action initially is going to be in the mid-band 5G, and that's what companies and businesses are gearing up for. And as a matter of fact, we have a deal right now with a large data center, and that's what we're doing. We're basically building an infrastructure so that they can migrate to 5G because they know what's coming, it's around the corner, and they want to be prepared for it.
All right, so that's a perfect segue into the next question. I'm going to take a shot at answering it, and then I'm going to throw it to Tom. How does the American market readiness compare to around the world, particularly in the EMEA markets? So we have a heck of a lot more territory. So there's a heck of a lot more deployment. I know we have hot spots. And in fact, Indianapolis, Indiana is one of those test spots. And there's some major metropolitan areas that have been doing it as well. So I would venture to say, as far as mass deployment goes, we're behind, but I could be completely wrong. Tom, I'm going to throw that to you.
No, you're correct. We are behind, especially from some of the Asian countries. I know in Korea, there's been a lot of development and deployment for 5G, and China to some extent. I know that right now, T-Mobile has a strong initiative to deploy antennas throughout a lot of cities right now. That's really what their focus is between now and the end of the year. And so they want to make sure that they can provide the infrastructure, but again, primarily in urban areas. And Verizon and AT&T are not too far behind. So as I said, the infrastructure truly is being built because there is a huge opportunity, as we've discussed, for 5G applications. Most likely the demand is going to be from businesses and industry first, and then obviously for consumers. But there's a lot of products that are in development that we talked about in the session, and those products are just going to be more pronounced as time rolls on.
Okay, another one for you, Tom. Another hardware question.
Sure.
Will we be getting a router with a SIM card and a WAN? And then Joe, you can chime in afterwards if you want.
Actually, I'm going to defer that question to Joe because that's really a networking question. So
Joe.
So I'm not going to name any companies. I've had this discussion with several of the networking companies in our space, and they had even considered it with 4G SIM cards, to be entirely honest, and even 3G SIM cards. That had already been a consideration, but they didn't see, the mass market applications yet. How widespread is this? Where can we get it? So 5G, I absolutely believe that there'll be, because you already look at some of the routers on our market right now. You can look at a Luxel Epic 5 router. It already has 2 hardwired WAN ports on it. It's already built for, a redundant failover. Maybe someday they'll add load balancing, but for a redundant failover. So my expectation is they've already looked at it. They know the importance of failover, especially in the luxury market, but 5G is going to be much more dependable and deployed everywhere. Definitely that's something I'm actually looking forward to seeing as well.
All right, 2 more questions, and these are future ones. If cellular will be that fast, how can we get equipment in the homes to be able to meet or match that? And as an example, this gentleman has a fiber running to the home, and the most they can get out of it is 1 gig, but the APs, the access points can't give them 1 gig. They can give them like 300 to 400, megabits per second. So I think the answer to this question is just, it's going to be a slow evolution, and we'll just see internal devices start to become faster. So Tom, Joe, any other comment on that?
No, go ahead. You go first, Tom.
Okay, so I was going to say that the fact that this person has fiber coming in the house, that's a key benefit. And, with this coronavirus situation, it's interesting because we're getting inquiries now from people that own estate homes. And some of the projects that we've quoted, some of these folks actually have commercial grade DAS systems installed in their residences, which is hard to believe, but think about it. If you're in the financial services industry and you're running, a business with, millions of dollars or billion-dollar deals, you want to make sure that you have connectivity, right? And so having that solution, it basically that infrastructure in place kind of ensures or future-proofs your system for these different types of 5G applications that we don't know what they are yet, but they're going to be in the home sooner rather than later. But the fact that you can prepare for that, I think, is a good thing.
Tom, based on what you just said, I'm going to throw in a question of my own. So that sounds to me like potentially the integrator is now going to need to play a larger role between the service provider and the homeowner. If someone's identified as somebody that needs that type of service, and then you've got to do all the inside and back end work with that, are the service providers still going to stay on the outside of the house, and we're going to need a lot more coordination in the inside? It's going to get more complicated with more choices.
I would agree with that, because again, even at this point right now, especially in the middle price space, we work with the carriers, but when the carrier gets involved is if they're providing the signal source for the DAS, right? But other than that, they're basically outside of the building, and then the integrator or the solutions provider is providing the infrastructure to propagate the signal inside the building. So I hope that answers your question in terms of, will there be carrier coordination? Probably not for a residential situation, but obviously for a commercial application, there will be, yes.
So to the first part of the original question, that may just be, the answer to that question may just be, that's just what your access point that you currently have supports. We know that access points that we installed 3 years ago, right now with ISP upgrades, they're supporting 400-500 right now. And those were ones we put in 3 years ago. And now you can get into some of the stuff that's out there, and 750 is kind of a benchmark. Things are faster than that now. So the technology is already there. We're already deploying it. It just may be your brand of choice at the time or when you got them. And to go on to what Tom just answered, I agree. Most of the ISP stuff is going to be on the outside of the house, but we know there are cases where ISPs are already stepping inside the house and running fiber all the way into the house to bring like a fiber ONT inside. We already see that happening. And then that comes into what Walt, said way earlier about being, a technology concierge. That does extend someday into dealing with the ISPs. It really does.
All right. We have one last question, and I totally spaced what I was just going to ask you. So I'm just going to go for the one last question. And this is another future one. And this is, I'm going to go ahead and answer this for you, answer the question, but I want to hear from both of you guys. I know what I was going to say. CEDIA did a booth talk on Wi-Fi 6 and the new advances in Wi-Fi 6. So if that might help answer some questions about AP and AP capabilities in the future, and that's recorded and that's free to everyone. So, and I think things are available to like the mid part or end part of December. Will Starlink make 5G old tech? And that is Elon Musk's putting, a gajillion satellites around the Earth. So I'm going to throw that one to Tom first.
We talk about that internally because that could be a great technology. In our opinion, I think the jury's still out on that, but that could be a game changer potentially.
I got my neuro implants, so
it's so dreamy though. You talk about those things that are just so far out there. Like, no, I don't know, maybe. It's kind of like. The power of 5G is that it's being spread from mile to mile. We're talking about space. I mean, it's space. I don't know. Yes, and lasers and stuff. I know. Well, do I think it'll make it old tech? No. I think the commonality is the closer the deployment, the closer your device is to it, will always be better. And depending on how Starlink deploys it, no.
All right. Good enough. Well, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for taking the time to do this panel, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to us. Again, this will be recorded. It has been recorded, but now the comments are also recorded, I believe, so you can check it out later. But thank you so much for attending, and we hope you have a good rest of your virtual expo. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.